All right. Well, let's go ahead and count down to the starting of this thing. Um, if you have questions and you still want to write them to me, you can do it in the chat area, or you can send them to my Facebook page, and I will be monitoring that probably towards the end as we get closer to the questions and answer part. Go back to there and I'll look at it. And also I'll get Twitter open here so you can tweet at me as well. The way you can do that is on Facebook. It is facebook.com/storyofmichael, and Twitter is at storyofmichael, and that's it. Um, so I'm going to sign in here, get everything ready for you guys. Make sure to tweet about me and tell everybody about this great new book that you heard about called The Story of Michael. So first thing I want to do is introduce myself. I am David Blaine, author of The Story of Michael. You may have seen me in The Hero of Time, which we completed, and my friend Joel and I completed in 2009. We had a feature, or a release, a 3-week release, limited release on Dailymotion in December, and I decided after that that my next project was going to be something I had personally worked on and creatively in my head for a long time. And it was time to spend a little more time on my own projects and work on my own stories. So what happened was I just started writing, and a lot of Phase 1 talks about that. If you go to the website under events, Phase 1, there's actually a whole transcript of our last event where I go over each of these things in detail. And I'll go there real quick and kind of tell you what it says. So basically I went over everything and told you where I got the ideas from, when I started writing, how I started writing, and what my inspiration was, and how I started it about 5 years ago when I was, I guess I can't remember if I told you I was going to school, and I would ride the train a lot, and so I would be riding there on the train. Actually, yeah, so if you go to the website under events, you can read more about Phase 1, and you will see how I started with everything, the story of Michael. So basically, a little bit about me. I am in marketing and online social media. Kind of made the switch from film after The Hero of Time, and I have started my own business, David Blaine Studios, where I do consulting for other businesses who are trying to get online and trying to expand their network, either socially or just need ideas for their brand or whatever. So one of my examples for practicing my marketing skills is the story of Michael. How I build the website and the blog and comment and develop content is kind of to help me practice my other work, but it's also a place for me to relieve my creative stresses and anxieties. All the buildups I have come out on the story of Michael, so thank you for dealing with that. Just kidding. Yeah, so the story of Michael is a very personal story to me in a way because it's a reflection of a lot of my beliefs and creative thoughts that I've had for a long time. And actually, it was originally a story that I conceived when I was a lot younger, but over time it's just evolved and taken different shapes. And so the version that y'all will see eventually is the one that we are talking about tonight. And so that brings me to the now notes that I'm about to read. And welcome you to our new discussion of Phase 2 and the completion of it. So Phase 1 was basically the entirety of writing, concept, and learning how to spew my creative craft all onto paper and making it a cohesive piece of work so that you could read from one end to the other and it would actually make some sort of sense. Regardless of grammatic errors or spelling errors or just factual things not making any sense. So phase one was really like trying to get all that out. Phase two is getting all of those papers now that I've printed out, so each chapter, and delving into each of them a little bit further. And this is a more analytical discussion and will require a little bit more thinking from everybody, hopefully. But it's also a journey that I like to take, and I'm excited to go on with you guys, the writing community. So here we go. We're going to start on my notes. Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining me. Tonight marks the end of a great journey. Phase 2 was a chance for me to delve deeper into each chapter. I created a document to help me analyze each chapter as a separate entity. This helped me tremendously. It allowed me to think about the story within a chapter without overwhelming me about thinking about the book as a whole. That is something I can do at a later time. And so as this phases progress, I will start looking at the book as a more whole instead of parts. Phase 2 breaks it down and allows me to go over a chapter easily. So what does phase 2 consist of? And this you can find on the event page and on thestorymichael.com. Phase 2 event recap. This is simply a list. It is reread, revisit, recapture all concepts. So validate what has come out of my head and make it, if it makes sense, keep it. If it doesn't, trash it. Question overall philosophy of the created world. So for each chapter, basically make sure that the philosophy, the moral of the story, as it were, makes sense. Also known as ideology in other studies. Make a checklist of elements each chapter must consist of. So these are things that you will see recurring in each chapter that you can standardize and make a checklist of. Enhance dialogue. So go through and make sure that your characters are speaking interestingly and correctly, and so that your reader is not thrown off and disgusted by what you're trying to tell them. Okay, so formulate character profiles and list dominant traits. So keeping track of your characters that you create, for me it's a little bit harder because I just kind of go off and I just throw this guy in there, throw this guy in there, and I don't always worry about their backstory. So this gives me a way to list out the characters, and that way I can go back and write a backstory if I want to, or delete them out of the book, or whatever needs to happen. Okay, so basically phase 2 means facing your fears about text. For me, most of what I reread, I remember thinking about already. But there were some surprises along the way that I will be talking about. So let's get into it. After this, I will be taking questions and answering the ones I've already received. In phase 1, I talked about my love for being creative, how I've shaped my view of writing as an art form, and how I define the rules of art. If you want to check out the phase 1 transcript for more on that, you can, and I've mentioned that already. It's on storymichael.com/events phase 1 event recap and discussion. It's just like this one, so you'll be able to find it pretty easily. In phase 1, we talked about that, okay, and tonight I'm going to talk about what it takes to stay organized and disciplined, and while being analytical. Being creative also means being incredibly scatterbrained, so I've experienced. So I wanted to show you what I did to combat those things. I work in spurts, number 1. If I don't feel like working, I don't. Number 2, I usually wait until I'm feeling emotionally contemplative and start listening to music to help the juices start flowing. Number 3, I write about things I care about. Sometimes I pull from events or build characters from perceptions of people I know in real life or events that have taken place. Of course, you would never recognize any of those things because I adapt them to the book's world. Now, that kind of rehashes phase one a little bit, but it shows how you can take your creativity and personality, analyze, and plan accordingly. The tough part is you really don't know what to do until you try. So the checklist I developed for my book, the document I created, is going to be different than the one you create, hopefully. But if I showed you mine, it would help you out, I think. The most helpful thing I did was develop a document. It's a generic document which I created that contains all the important aspects of a chapter. It's like a checklist with room to write notes. This may seem easy, but give yourself a good list and it's hard to get through a chapter quickly. You'll find that what you wrote may be different than what you originally thought. You may even be forced to think that a chapter is completely terrible and needs to be rewritten, which is a good thing. It means that you're honest with yourself and you know that people aren't going to read crappy stuff. Okay, so the document I created will be available to you at a later time, and I'll figure out how to make it available for everybody to download for free. So subscribe to me via email or on Facebook at facebook.com/storymmichael. I said that last time too. Or Twitter at symbol storymichael. Or visit the blog. Just come back and type it into Google. See what happens. All right, so I'm going to go into what the document actually does and what it looks like. And so for me, I have chapter underscore analysis. So under there, I write what chapter number it is, and then under that title, under that line, I write the title. So both of these things can change and are subject to at any time, but for now, it helps me keep it organized. The first point on this document is, does the overall concept deliver on expectations? So just overall, how did I think about it? After rereading it for a second or third time, did it strike me as something that I think was accurate when I was writing it? Was that what I was thinking? Does it sound like that? Or is it all in my head? Am I just recreating what I saw? So it's like, it just makes you question everything and, list things like, I just say, yes, it was great, but there's some missing elements that I want to add. Or it was terrible, I can't believe that came out of my brain. So yeah, it's a chance for you to be honest with yourself about the rest of these points. The second one is atmosphere, and this is a little confusing because I come from a video background, and that would mean something like mise-en-scène, which is what is in the scene. What do you see? What do you sense? What's the presence around you? It's not necessarily the emotion of the scene, it's what the elements or environment that affects emotion or could affect the emotion but doesn't, or just simply describes the location. So it can be very descriptive, but it can also invoke emotion. It's kind of a complicated theoretical term. The next one is the mood and emotion. So that is the actual part that would be affected. The people, the characters who they show the emotion, and what are those emotions? But how is it overarching? How is an overarching emotion? So was it a sad chapter? Was it a happy chapter? Did somebody have a birthday party? Did somebody die? Was stuff like that. So I mean, those are all pretty strong and obvious elements of emotion. So the next one is connection to the reader. That's an important one because in this one you can say pretty much anything. Connection to the reader for me would be, how do you relate your reader to the characters that you've created? What about them seems, even if it's a fictional book and none of these people would ever exist and none of the things would ever happen, how do they still seem human, and how do we relate to them? So what is that element there? So so maybe if you see a little girl on the street and she gets hit by a car, obviously you'd be like a little